All right, everyone, Elise here. Thank you so much for joining us for R828, the podcast. I simply want to inspire you for the better. It is my prayer that the content here will do just that. For those of you who don't know, R828 is simply an abbreviation for Romans chapter 8, verse 28 in the Bible, which says, we know all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. So your life has a purpose, no matter what you've been through, no matter the obstacles. And so we hope to bring in people here who will illustrate that, who've either gone through a lot and have gotten to their purpose and are living through it, or who may still be going through some things, or who may have made some mistakes in the past. That doesn't matter. That should not stop you. So without further ado, let me get right to it. My guest today, Dr. Antonio Webb, is an esteemed fellowship-trained spine surgeon in Texas and Iraq combat veteran, keynote speaker, so much more. Really an inspiration and influence to a lot of people. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So before we get into, how you became a spine surgeon, tell me a little bit about your background, your childhood growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana. My dad was in the military, and we moved around quite a bit, but he got stationed at Barksdale Air Force Base, and it's in Bossier City, but ended up in Shreveport, and that's where I went to middle school, high school, and that's what I can consider my home.
So growing up in Louisiana and Shreveport, were you like, I'm going to be a spine surgeon, like that's going to be my thing? Or how did you, what did you think you would be as a child?
Well, I didn't know what I would be. Shreveport was a pretty dangerous time. Well, it still is. It's actually the eighth most dangerous city in the U.S. When I was growing up. And there was a lot of negative influences. There was a lot of drugs, gangs, violence. And I attended a medical magnet program in high school, got accepted to that, and that exposed me to the field of medicine. And that's the reason why I'm a doctor today. But outside of that, if it wasn't for that program, I'm pretty sure I would probably be either dead or in jail, because I have friends and family members who kind of that's exactly what happened to them. So.
When you talk about kind of getting through that and overcoming what could have been a dangerous life, a different lifestyle for you, was it going into the service that helped you to, avoid that, other than going to that high school, which you've given credit to, but, what did the service play a part in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the reason why I joined the Air Force, or one of the reasons why. I knew I needed to get out of that environment, just hanging around the wrong crowd, and there's a lot of bad and kind of negative things kind of going on. And I had family members who were going to prison, and my father was in the military in the Air Force, and he actually signed a waiver for me to join at age 17. So I left my senior year of high school about midway through. I had finished all my credits, and they let me go to boot camp. And after boot camp, I was in Air Force kind of training to become a medic, and they allowed me to leave and go back to walk with my high school class. So that was pretty cool in my military uniform, so to catch up with them.
That's definitely very cool. Throughout that, what was kind of the one thing that you stuck to kind of get you through it?
My father, he was a role model. He grew up a really rough background himself. Joined a gang, did drugs, sold drugs, spent time in prison. But he turned his life around, became a minister, and we would go out into the streets of Louisiana to minister to the homeless people, hand out pamphlets, hand out food. And he became a minister and also a pastor at one point, and had his own church in Marshall, Texas. But it was him, and then my older brother, who mostly stayed out of trouble as well. And he was kind of a role model to me. And my best friend, we kind of stuck together and stuck to the books. And he also became a physician. He's a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist. And we just held each other accountable. And even to this day, we still keep each other accountable for certain things. So.
I'm sure that,
20 years later.
Right. I'm sure that has to help. Especially both of you being in medicine, a lot of similarities with understanding what each other is going through. Do you recall a time while serving and being a medic that you thought, whoa, I don't know if this is something I want to continue to go through with?
Yeah, so I joined the Air Force. I did 8 years in the military. I went to Iraq in 2005. I was a medic there. And that was a really dangerous time. It was right kind of when the war first kicked off. We were in an area that was 20 miles north of Baghdad. And we went to a place called Mortarville, and they named it that because we got shot at with mortars, which are like grenades, about 3 to 4 times per day. And our unit survived over 100 mortar attacks while we were there. There was one instance where one went right over my head and hit the ground, maybe 10, 15 feet away, but it didn't explode. It was a dud, and it's called the explosive ordnance team had to come in and detonate that grenade. But yeah, we got a couple close calls like that while we were trying to do our job there. But I think just being in the military, trying to go to school full time, I knew going in that I eventually wanted to get out and go to medical school. That's what my best friend did, and he went straight to college. He did his medical school residency and fellowship. So we both knew that coming from that high school program that we wanted to become physicians, and we just took two kind of separate paths. But the hardest part was probably juggling full-time schoolwork with full-time working on active duty in the military. And it took me 7 years to get my undergraduate degree because I kept having to drop classes. You can imagine working full-time in the military and then going to school at nighttime, the weekend, internet courses. I went to four or five different colleges just because I wanted to take classes like wherever they offered them and whatever can kind of fit my schedule. So
this wasn't like a straight path to get to where you are.
No, absolutely not. No. Yeah, it was definitely a lot of late nights. I would work in the ICU as a medical technician in the military, and get off work at 7 a.m. Go to school at 8 till about 1. Go to sleep from 1:30, 2 o'clock to about 6, and then go back to work again. So I did that for my whole degree, 7 years.
What was there ever a point where you were thinking, I'm not going to get the degree, or I'm going to give up, or did you get close to that?
Yeah, there were several times where I felt discouraged, or times where, it was really, it wears you down, not getting sleep and working full time and going to school and still trying to maintain a competitive GPA to get into medical school. That was probably the hardest part. But, then getting out the military and then applying to medical school, and it took me 3 years to get in, and every single year that I applied, I got rejected. So that was, a really kind of challenging feat to overcome. But, finally got into medical school and did really well and matched into a really competitive specialty. And yeah.
How many times did you apply before you got the yes?
I applied for 3 years. Every single year, every school that I applied to rejected me.
Wow. And I mean, just look now, fast forward, I don't know how long ago that was in particular, but what do you think are some practical steps that put you on the path, besides not giving up, that put you on the path to success?
I would say it was being very persistent, knowing exactly what I wanted to achieve, and finally realizing that failure is it's not a bad thing. It's actually something that you can use to your advantage. I actually really appreciate failures to this day, because it lets me know what I can kind of improve on, and what areas of my life that can be a little bit better. So after every failure that I have went through in my life, I try to analyze and sit back and say, hey, what can I take away from this to make me a better person in the future? So every point it fell on a test, or struggling on certain courses, or not getting into medical school. And I'm a strong believer in that everything happens for a reason. And you may not really understand it at that moment, but there's a reason behind everything that happens. And I really believe that.
I don't know why this is just playing in my head, but going back to that story of you with the the grenade and it being a dud, and how that moment could have been such the opposite of, you couldn't, there's a point where you might have not been here today. Do you ever kind of think about that?
Oh, absolutely. That's why my book, Overcoming the Odds, from the war on the streets of Louisiana to the war on terrorism in Iraq. I could have been killed in Shreveport growing up. Was in a lot of situations where I should not have been, and being in Iraq, yeah, that grenade would have went off that day. It would have took out our whole compound, so I wouldn't be on this conversation with you. So, yeah, by the grace of God, that got through living in Shreveport, got through living in Iraq. Just the other day, a couple of friends that I went to high school with, they got arrested for this big drug bust and drug ring that they were doing for a few years. And, I hear stories about Shreveport, somebody's getting shot or getting robbed, or, a lot of crazy things that are going on in that town. I'm glad I left when I did.
We talk about, your service and then medical school. Did it get easier after medical school, or what is it like now?
Well, medical school was challenging in itself. For those who kind of don't know the path, you have to do 4 years of college, take the medical college admission test called the MCAT, and then you do. But depending on your specialty, that depends on how many years your residency will be. My residency was 5 years of general orthopedic surgery residency, and then I did an additional year to subspecialize into spine surgery. Some residencies are 8 years, plastic surgery, neurosurgery, and then you can do a fellowship after that. Some are 4 years, some are 3 years. So it depends on your specialty. But no, I wouldn't say it got easier. It's definitely a different level of, complexity, especially working sometimes up to 100 hours a week on trauma surgery, taking care of patients operating at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. So I mean, it's a lot of work, and you really have to want this path. Otherwise, it's not for everyone. It took me 11 years of training after college to get to this point, and it's a lot of hard work, and still hard work to this day. I still study, I still read, still prepare for surgeries. I'm on call this weekend, but it's still a lot of work. The lifestyle is you have to make a lot of sacrifices.
100 hours a week.
Sometimes more than that. Sometimes 120. I used to work 30-hour shifts on trauma surgery every 3 days. I would stay at the hospital for 30 hours.
The trauma surgery, is that, in the ER when
Yeah.
folks are coming in?
Yeah. So when a patient gets into a car accident and they break their hip or their leg, or someone gets shot, had airplane crashes, gun, fights. Uh, the orthopedic surgeons, we're the busiest doctors in the hospital because of that. So my call room where I would sleep at, and had a bed and fridge, it was probably 20 feet from the trauma bay. So when the patients come in at 2 o'clock in the morning, they call me and I go see the patient and take them to surgery, or manage their condition kind of there. But yeah, 30 hours every 3 days. I would go in at 7 a.m. one morning and get off the next morning, probably the next day, probably around 12 or 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. So it just depends.
How do you stay, fresh and prepared and even motivated yourself?
I think you need to. People talk about the work-life balance, and that's something that I'm still trying to figure out. I have 2 little ones, and I have a wife, and I have to spend time with them and make sure they get the time that they deserve. But I think you just have to figure out what's most important to you, and a lot of things may get pushed to the side. And along this journey, I missed a lot of birthdays, missed a lot of important events, family dinners and holidays, just because I was working. But that's just it comes with the nature of being a physician and surgeon. So
I've been able to kind of scope out your social media and see how people respond to you and how you are reaching people, whether it's like your YouTube channel, your, being an author, or just, just sharing your story and little posts and things like that, and being on local media or whatnot. What has it meant for you to have people say that you inspired them to want to be a doctor?
Yeah, that means the world to me because growing up, I didn't know any black doctors. I had never saw a black doctor, and I didn't know any doctors at all. And no one in my family is a doctor. My mom got her GED, and my dad did 2 or 3 semesters of college. He went to Grambling State for a few semesters, but outside of that, in my immediate family, no one's kind of past the kind of college kind of stage. So for me, I thought it was really important for kids that are from similar backgrounds as myself, or who may not have a parent as a doctor, or may not have someone that they can look up to, so they can look up to me and and say if I can do it and go through all that, they can also. So that's kind of the inception of my YouTube channel, is just to encourage students to go into the field of STEM, STEM as well as medical fields. And I try to feature minorities as well as females because that's the target audience that I want to reach. And yeah, I get emails from people from all over the world that are saying that they hear about me and are inspired by that. So that makes me feel really good. And the work is just getting started.
Yeah, I mean, in your field alone, I don't know, but even today, do you see many Black spine surgeons, for
Mhm.
example? And you're in a very specialized
Yeah.
field, obviously.
Yeah, for orthopedic surgeons, it's less than 1.5% that are African American, even less than that for spine surgeons. So this is a male Caucasian dominated field. There's some studies that came out that showed that there were more black males that applied to medical school in I believe it was 76, than there were in 2014. So the need is there. I was part of a documentary that's coming out. It's called Black Men in White Coats, where we're trying to just increase awareness about that we need more black physicians. People need to be treated by physicians and providers that look like them, that can relate to them. And that's kind of my passion, and something that hopefully I can increase and get more kind of black males, young females, to go into the field of medicine.
How does that change the care that you're able to give, and and having that um, that basis of commonality with someone? How does that kind of affect how you are able to care for that patient?
Yeah, there's multiple studies that show patients do better, if the physicians they have some type of commonality, whether that's a particular race or language. There's several studies that show patients that are African American are less likely to get knee replacements or hip replacements. They're less likely to get their pain kind of treated in the emergency room. So several studies that kind of show that disparity in kind of our medical kind of educational and medical system overall.
Okay, well, I think we are just about wrapping up here. Is there anything else that you want to add, or as far as like advice, one good piece of advice you might just pass on to someone who might be listening to your story here?
Yeah, so I would say, if whatever field that you want to go into, whether it's business, law, pay off your student loans or get into dental school, whatever it is that you want to achieve, you just have to really kind of pick at it, work at it really hard. Each time that you fail, analyze why you fell and ask yourself, what can I do to improve in the future? And I always tell students, like, if I can go through everything that I went through and still reach my goals of becoming a spine surgeon, everyone else can also. So
Definitely. Where can people connect with you and learn more about you?
yeah, so all of my social media sites are Antonio Webb MD. My website, AntonioWebbMD.com, and just type that in and I should come up.
There's got to be a movie in the making, I'm thinking. What do you
Well,
think?
I did shoot a documentary that should be probably after the new year. It's basically about myself kind of growing up and everything that I went through and how I got to this point. So yeah, that's definitely dropping probably early in the 2021.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Webb. Appreciate your time and take care.
All right, thank you so much for having me.